This is No Excuses, and I'm here with two lovely ladies, and my name is Rodney Arbona. If you don't know that already, that's kind of silly. And I'm here with Marianna Mankowska, right? And Rita Ciolek, and they have a wonderful film coming up on child abuse. Why I say wonderful? Because it's broken down to 4 points. It's very informative, and it's going to help folks experience this. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
It's so great. I always like getting involved in stories of this nature because, unfortunately, so many people don't know where to go. They don't understand what they're experiencing, and they don't know how to go about what their feelings are. So the fact that you came up with these 4 points, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so the film, this is going to be a documentary feature film on child abuse, and we really want to drive home sort of 4 main points. One, we want to focus on the experiences of victims and survivors, so those stories are going to be very important. But the emphasis really then goes on to effects of abuse, especially long-term effects, and especially forming healthy relationships, healing from this trauma, and then sort of reflecting in your life about, well, how is this affecting me? Romantic relationship, how is that being affected? And also with respect to parents. So those people who were abused as children now becoming parent, and oftentimes there can be a confusion in terms of, well, what's normal child behavior and when is my child misbehaving? And so this kind of a reflective parenting and sort of knowing about that and being educated about that can sort of help them sort through that stuff.
That's great points. Now, also, I've met many people, and I actually have a dear friend who experienced what you're talking about. And one of the things her and I talk about is PTSD. And most people who've never experienced don't even understand that there's these lingering effects. And even when you get therapy, there's still triggers that sometimes you can't get rid of these triggers. And I understand you two ladies also had some experiences yourselves. Can you tell us a little bit, one at a time? Rita, why don't you go first?
Yes, so I had an abusive father growing up. He was abusive emotionally, verbally, and physically. And the unfortunate consequence of that is what you had just said, and that's what's being defined by psychologists as a chronic PTSD. And the result for me is that then I became a person who is hyper alert, hyper vigilant, always scanning the environment, looking for danger. And so the result is that I start to maybe have problems focusing, and especially then my body takes a toll because I'm exhausting my adrenal system. Sure. And I just have this sort of like a chronic exhaustion, allergies, all these weird things that are showing up as a result of this prolonged abuse.
Well, that's actually very normal. Anytime we put our bodies through stress, one of the key ingredients that affects us the most is our autoimmune system. And once our autoimmune system gets depleted, once again, like you said, illnesses will creep in, viruses are going to take over our body. And these are things that people need to recognize, what you just mentioned. How about you, Marianna?
Well, I have everything that she has. It's very funny, really. We are talking about very funny subject. No. And apart from this, I have splitting. So like you see the same person as 2 different persons, and then in adult, in the adult life, this causes a lot of disturbance when it comes to relationships, romantic and friendships and everything. Because as Rita said, you're always scanning the environment and looking for the worst, not the best possible options. And also because of I had a very toxic, psychopathic father, and because this abuse was constant until he died, then I was raised in this toxic environment, and I didn't even know that was not normal. So when I was actually 35 years old, I went to treatment in psychiatrist hospital. And then they told me that my childhood environment was not the one that should be, which was a shock for me.
Sure.
I didn't even know at that point that this is not normal. So I thought, because I was told that all of these things that Rita addressed this is my nature. This is who I am. This is my personality. As I very often heard, this is because of my character, of my personality. It's not because it happened. Something happened to me. So I was blaming myself, like, oh, I'm no good, I cannot form a healthy relationship because of me, because I'm trouble, because I'm difficult. And now I know that those are all consequences regarding this child, abuse. So this is what we also want to show in our movie.
Yeah, and I wanted to add a couple things to it. So one thing is about this kind of a split mind. This is another thing, because we're right now we're having conversations with psychologists and psychiatrists, experts on child abuse. And so one of the things that Dr. Ramani specifically mentioned was about this mind split that occurs when the child experiences abuse from a parent that like loves him, but at the same time terrifies him and abuses him or her, doesn't matter, right, in terms of sex. And so what happens is that the child develops these like two alternate realities. And so the journey to healing then in adulthood is all about integrating that, and that takes a lot of therapy and a lot of work. You really can't do that work on your own because you need someone to reflect that back to you. That's why Marianna had gone through the treatment. I had gone through a lot of therapy, and I continue to have that kind of a support system in place. And so that's one thing. And then another thing is about, and the themes. So we started with that when Marianna said, I feel, or I experience the same thing that Rita has. And so what we found through our research is that a lot of the victims and the survivors experience very similar things.
It's all the same.
It's very, very similar. One of the main things that have been that's been a big discovery is that we all have these huge fears and anxieties and phobias and panic attacks that seem to be coming from nowhere and yet are definitely connected to the abuse from childhood.
Well, I'm sure one of the main things that everyone is feeling is the fact that you've depleted your worthiness. You don't feel the worthiness. And of course, whenever a person doesn't feel worthiness, they're going to be a target for abuse. And that then, without proper therapy, of course, you're going to then repeat, right? Because like Marianna said perfectly, you think it's normal until you get the proper attention and the proper help that takes you a step back and understands that, A, it's not normal. Sometimes it's even good to understand maybe your parent was abused, because we have to get down to the core of the problem, right?
Right.
And get all the way down, and maybe it's generations. My dad was abused by his mom. He was always beaten, and I know when he was raising us, a heavy hand was there from time to time, more love and affection than not. But I never hurt him for it. I understood it was his mother. That's how he was raised. He wasn't raised with a dad. So she tried to use abusiveness to that degree of raising a child. So it's scarring. Let's face it. It's very scarring. Yes. And the triggers, I'm sure, for the two of you.
Some of them is like they experience. And sometimes you do not have excuses for this. So this is also very important, because a lot of people who went through therapy, they end up cutting off the connection with their parents. And this is also okay, like at this point, because sometimes even their life were in jeopardy.
Yeah. Of course.
So sometimes it is okay.
Yeah, and what Marianna had said, not in every instance there is a parent who was themselves abused, but oftentimes it is, like in my case. And when I look at the lineage of women in my family, every one of them was abused. So this is my mother, this is my aunt, this is both of my grandmothers, as far as I can see. So it's definitely a generational issue. I was thinking about this the other day as a kind of a supply-demand thing, is because, it's like if we women don't own our sense of self-worth, then we're going to put ourselves in these positions to become victims of abuse. But if the supply is not there, then, you know, I mean, then the demand is not going to be there, because if we're not going to put up with certain behaviors from men, then the men are going to have to step up.
Yes, but first you need to address these behaviors. Like you need to know.
Yes.
What is a deal breaker?
Right. And let's go back the fact that there is no excuse for this. This is not a good thing.
Absolutely. This
is not masking it, and we're not gonna give our parents or the abuser a rite of path by any means. Women and men who are abused as well. That's right. You mentioned stepping up, Rita. It's a matter of recognizing that it's abuse. Once you can fully recognize that this is an abusive behavior, then you can make the right decisions going forward. But like Marianna said perfectly before, if you think it's normal, you're just going to continue on. You don't really know any better. And people say, well, adults should know better. Well, it's very difficult to know better if it's ingrained for generations, like you mentioned a moment ago, Rita. You're talking generations. It's like almost like a DNA process.
Right. And I think it absolutely is. And it's a biology as well as, you know, behavior and the learned behaviors.
Now you mentioned something a moment ago.
It's imprinted. Yeah. It's imprinted.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have.
Yeah, absolutely, Marianna. You mentioned something before which I found very interesting, is split minds. I don't really think I've never heard that term. I mean, I can understand it in a split personality, but in an abusive component, using that term split minds, I think we should touch a little bit on that topic. I think it would open up a lot of people's minds who hear this and say, wow, now I know why I'm acting the way I'm acting. And this is such a wonderful process for the two of you to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with a split mind and creating different realities, also at the same time, we disconnect from emotions. And this is like one of the subjects that is definitely going to be part of the film, because both Marianna and I realized that we had the same experience, in that because the effect of that split is that then you start sort of numbing yourself and try not to feel, because what happens is that when the child is overwhelmed by an emotion, the child disconnects from that emotion. And so essentially the result is that we suddenly become adults and we realize that we don't understand emotions. We don't know how to name them. We have a very difficult time, both her and I, expressing emotions. And also differentiating between like subtle emotions. So we understand like big emotions like anger and frustration, but anything subtle and God forbid love, that is something that we have a very difficult time with. And especially talking about love, because that requires vulnerability and it requires the feeling of safety. And because that was not provided growing up, that's really hard, and this is the effect of relationships, and it's a bottomless pit.
Yes, and also with the splitting, when you have at the same time you are living in two realities.
Yeah.
And only one is real, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But this gives you a possibility to like make excuse for abuser. Oh, this person is not so bad because like yesterday he cooked dinner for me. He was nice. You know, what happened after maybe was not nice, but in general, this is a good person. Sure. So this is making excuses, right? All the time. This makes this, your door is always open, like I'm handling this situation and everything is under control. And eventually, sometimes it is not, like, because those people are also very dangerous.
Of course.
Yeah. And for women, I remember when Regina, a psychiatrist we spoke with about this mind split, basically had said that, you know, it's that feeling of he loves me and he terrifies me. And those two things, the effect oftentimes for a female is that she then becomes attracted to abusive men.
Of course, it's called history repeating itself. I tend to wonder, though, if the word "he loves me" is actually really he's loving you. He might be affectionate towards you, but I don't know if that's really love if he's being abusive in any manner. It could be
we had that discussion.
Right? It could be verbal. It could be body language. It could be by the physicals, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Any component of that, I don't find that to be love. If it's negative, of course, we should be uplifting people, not trying to tear them down. Let me ask you a question at this point. What are you trying to do with this film? What is your ultimate goal to accomplish for the people watching your film?
Do you want to take this? Or?
Okay, I can. Well, because for me it was very important to find informative materials when I start my awakening process, because I didn't have it in home. I eventually didn't find it in my therapy. So when I start searching YouTube, just like basic stuff, and I get the answers. So I thought, and then when I spoke with people, I know that the most important is for those victims to get information. What is going on with me? Why I am reacting to very like basic, simple, situation in a very abrupt way? Well, there are answers, and you have to just, give them this answer. So this is, I think, one of the goals.
Yeah, excellent. This is one of the goals. And of course, the other that we specifically always talk about when we talk about our film is that for people to, defining abuse and for people to recognize if they're in that situation. Because both Marianna and I we didn't know we were being abused when we were being abused. Amazing. And so just that fact, to realize that, is sort of like that first step to healing. That's
wonderful, ladies. I want to really thank you for being on the show. This is such a wonderful topic to share, both, and your stories to share. It's strengthening. So I can't say enough about how much strength you're showing us by sharing your stories is going to allow other people that level of comfort and the path to finding their own success in life, which is wonderful. So thanks for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rodney. We appreciate it so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I want to welcome once again Rita and Marianna for being on the No Excuses. We'll see you once again, and I can't wait for this film to come out, and we'll keep everybody informed. Take care, folks.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.